The following program is an original production of WYCC PBS Chicago.
What a mess, the state of Illinois' financial fiasco. Who's to blame, and what does this mean to Illinois taxpayers now and for years to come?
Giving at its best as government programs come up short. One Chicago church with a unique plan to help those in need.
Accusations of bribery. Has the city's red light camera vendor been caught in the act?
Plus, Dennis Rodman's new BFF. Is this a game changer in diplomatic relations with North Korea? Those stories tonight on In the Loop. Good evening, I'm Chris Bury.
And I'm Barbara Pinto. Tonight we take an in-depth look at Illinois' perilous financial mess.
The state is billions of dollars behind in paying its bills. How bad is Illinois' credit rating? The worst of all 50 states, and it gets even scarier. The state's pension shortfall now at a whopping $97 billion.
This week, Governor Pat Quinn presented his budget for the coming fiscal year. He pushed for pension reform, blaming state lawmakers for dragging their feet.
We all know that we must reform the Illinois public pension system. So, members of the General Assembly, what are you waiting for?
Governor Quinn took the tone of an angry father, scolding lawmakers for their failure to act on meaningful pension reform. A stalemate, he says, cost Illinois taxpayers an extra $17 million a day.
We cannot turn to our taxpayers to repair the pension problem.
So, in fact, I think taxpayers are going to have to pay more, and I wish politicians would be willing to say that. Sorry, you're going to have to pay more to pay off these mistakes that we've made in the past.
What are those mistakes, and how did Illinois get into this mess? UIC professor of public administration David Merriman says it started decades ago when the state failed to meet its pension payments. When they were made, those payments came up short. Professor Merriman says the system is flawed since school districts don't pay employee pensions. The state does, making the situation worse. The financial crash of 2008 that bloated the massive pension debt to more than $96 billion.
The responsibility for retiring that debt is going to be split between three groups. One group is the taxpayers. The second group is the employers, and by that I mean the school districts and the universities primarily. And then finally, the members of the pension system.
Saddled with pension debt, Illinois has been unable to pay its bills, owing nearly $10 billion to state vendors and contractors. One of them is the Assyrian Universal Alliance Foundation on Chicago's North Side. Homer Ashurian is the executive director. His foundation trains and employs about 1,600 aides who provide daily home care services for thousands of low-income seniors.
They clean, they bathe their clients, and they wash their clothes and clean the houses and cook them and go to the shopping and help them, that kind of work.
That care saves the state millions of dollars otherwise spent on nursing homes. Ashurian claims the Illinois Department on Aging owes him between $8 and $10 million.
Several times we wrote them and we begged them and do whatever we could do.
If you establish a pattern of not living up to your expectation, to establish a pattern of irresponsible behavior, which the state already is doing, that I truly believe pushes people away from the state, and that'll hurt the economic development of the state.
Among the state's other outstanding bills, $118 million owed to Walgreens, $768 million owed to public school districts across the state, $526 million owed to the University of Illinois, and $8 million to funeral homes for cremation and burial of the indigent. Governor Quinn wrapped up his budget address with a stern warning.
This is the most difficult budget Illinois has ever faced, and it is only a preview of the pain that is to come if this General Assembly does not act decisively on comprehensive pension reform.
For the backstory, we are now joined by Lawrence Missal, president of the Civic Federation. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
When you look at these numbers, they're almost mind-boggling. $96 billion at a cost of $17 million a day when we leave this unsolved. When we look at this, how angry should taxpayers be, and who's to blame here?
Well, the taxpayers are already angry, and most people who look at the state of Illinois' finances are very worried. The Civic Federation is very concerned that the state is continuing to avoid the biggest issue that we face, which is the unfunded pension liability. The governor last year at this very time stood up before the General Assembly in his budget address and said we are going to have to reform the pensions and we're going to have to reform the Medicaid program. They reformed the Medicaid program during the spring session. They did not get to pension reform. It's a very difficult issue for the legislature to deal with. One of the reasons why it's so difficult is because they are going to affect their own pensions as well. We're not talking about taking away pensions in terms of what's on the table in terms of reform. We're talking about taking away the automatic 3% compounded increase. That could save as much as a third of that $96 to $97 billion unfunded liability.
But that increase, the public employee unions have said again and again, is unconstitutional to mess with that because it's embedded in the state of Illinois Constitution, and that's been a huge stumbling block.
Well, that's been one of the reasons, and there is a plethora of reasons that people have used in the legislature as to why they haven't passed pension reform. Certainly anything that the legislature does and that the governor signs related to pension reform is going to be challenged in the courts. It's going to go all the way up to our elected state Supreme Court justices who will then decide whether they can make changes for not just the pension benefit program in the future, but the ones receiving the benefit right now. We changed the benefits for employees hired after January of 2011. New employees that are coming in are receiving a much lesser and much less expensive benefit than the current employees and retirees.
But when you look at Springfield, I mean, this past week alone, Speaker Mike Madigan introduced 4 separate ideas to reform budgets. He is the head of the Democratic supermajority. Arm twister in chief, according to some, and unable to get more than 5 votes on any of those measures. What's going on here? Is there just not a political will to solve this?
That remains the question. Where is the political will? Where is the leadership? The governor did a very effective job during his speech by focusing like a laser on the pension problem.
But he got a very cool reception.
Right, and he did not give a specific plan that he supports to solve the pension problem. He indicated what he would like to have as part of the pension compromise. One thing that has been lacking that we've seen in other states, Rhode Island had a very similar challenge and a very similar situation in which the treasurer of Rhode Island championed a solution that ended up stabilizing that government's finances. We don't have a champion among the legislative leaders and the governor, a consensus on what that solution is. The governor has been doing a better job articulating the problem. We need to get the legislature and the governor on the same page and put something, as the governor says, put a pension reform bill on his desk. He made a big point of saying there's never even been a vote in the House on pension reform. There's an excellent bill that Representative Nekritz and Senator Daniel Biss and Representative Cross, the minority leader, and 40 other members of the General Assembly have signed on to, but that has not been called for a vote in Springfield yet.
So give us a sense of what happens if this can gets kicked down the road even more and nothing happens. What should our viewers, what should taxpayers know about what lies ahead?
First of all, the can analogy is very good. Unfortunately, now the can is a 55-gallon drum when it's $97 billion. They can't kick it. Now they're trying to build a budget around it, which is that the governor is going to have to cut education, he's going to have to cut other priorities, human services, and the unpaid bills will continue to rise if they don't deal with pension reform. The state is the worst rated credit in the United States. All of the 50 states have a better credit rating and are doing a better job managing their finances than the state of Illinois. What that means for the taxpayers in Illinois is we are paying much more than we should to borrow for our capital and other needs of the state government. The risk is that if the rating agencies, and they've warned the state of Illinois, that will be Moody's and Standard & Poor's and Fitch, have said if the state does not address the pension crisis, we are going to further downgrade the state. If they fall into less than investment grade, junk bond status, many financial institutions, pension funds will not be able to purchase the state's debt, and there is a real question whether the state will have access at a reasonable cost of the credit markets.
And we've already got, as we know, and we can see in this document on the screen here, just billions of dollars in unpaid bills. The state owes vendors $9 billion. By 2018, it's going to owe vendors $22 billion. That is amazing.
Right. There is no history or anything we can point to as to whether the state can continue to operate owing so much money to its vendors. Another place that you're going to see this stress and why Mayor Emanuel is so adamant that there needs to be pension reform. The Chicago Public Schools face $1 billion budget deficit this summer, and about $350 million of that is tied to their pension contribution increase that they need to make up for past underfundings. If they don't get pension relief in Springfield at the state, it's hard to see how they will get it for the Chicago Public Schools and for the other units of government that are dependent on it. How they will be able to open the Chicago Public Schools would remain a question.
Now, you and your organization have been sounding the alarm for a while. The governor is sounding the alarm. What is it going to take to break this logjam?
It's going to take leadership at both the political and at the government level. You're going to have to see the legislators, the legislative leaders respond to their members who are demanding pension reform. The citizens have to reach out to their members of the General Assembly and tell them they want meaningful pension reform. They don't want to face more cuts in essential services. They don't want to see Illinois fall off the cliff financially so that it actually collapses, that we no longer are able to provide services. Those are some of the real fears, and people, especially on the outside, that look at Illinois' finances, shake their head that we have let such a rich and such an asset-filled community of the state of Illinois be driven into such bad financial shape.
And also, as we saw in the opening piece, the threat of even more tax hikes on top of a huge tax hike that Illinois just got in the last year.
Exactly. It is really inexcusable to be talking about new tax increases until you stabilize the government. And there will, I believe, not be political support. My organization will not support new taxes for the state of Illinois unless it addresses its core problem on the underfunding of the pensions and shows that it can spend the money responsibly.
Wow, we're in a scary situation. Lawrence Massal, we thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
As Illinois struggles to pay its bills and the federal government makes big spending cuts, some Americans are losing confidence in the nation's ability to help the less fortunate. But here in Chicago, one church and its parishioners are restoring some of that lost faith. Old Cabrini Green, a neighborhood in transition between urban blight and urban sprawl. Park Community Church is an oasis in this near North Side community, an active and important neighbor to residents here.
When we came into this neighborhood, Cabrini Green, we really had no experience of the issues. We really want to have that kind of impact where neighborhoods are better for us being here.
Each week, parishioners help in that cause, digging deeply into their pockets to support the church and the community. But one Sunday, this past January, the church turned the tradition of the collection plate on its head.
It's kind of a reverse. We passed out envelopes, and people were quite surprised. Every envelope contained a $2 bill, and some was just a $2 bill, but others was as much as $102. So everyone kind of got a different amount. And so it was sort of like, you know, opening up a surprise package to sort of see what you're going to get.
Erin Indovina was one of those attending service that Sunday.
Our pastor here had a unique challenge, one I'd never seen before, and said, I'm going to hand out an envelope today and it's going to contain some money in it. And in that money, I'm going to challenge you to reinvest it back into the community.
Erin's envelope contained only $3. She took her responsibility seriously, praying about how to grow her money. When a story about the church's novel approach appeared in the Chicago Tribune the next day with her photo, Erin's prayers were answered.
In a month or so, people had actually mailed money to me, to my home and to my office, and told me to add it to the envelope. And within 2 months, it had grown from $3 to $421.
About 2,600 parishioners at Park Community Church received an envelope that day. In all, the church handed out nearly $12,000, making good on its mission to truly help its neighbors.
The thing we wanted to really explain to our people is not to live in Chicago as simply a tourist, but to get engaged, and that involves your time, that involves your talent, but it also involves your resources.
As Erin's money grows, so do her ambitions. She started a fund to help the homeless. She's calling it the KIN Fund. That's Nick backwards, named for a homeless man she passes every day on her way to work.
It's really been eye-opening, and I hope it's life-changing, not just for this year, but something that I can or will be mindful of for the rest of my life.
Other parishioners have spent their money helping the victim of a fire. One family assembled kits of essential items for the homeless, and another group pooled their money for a bake sale that raised even more for the neighborhood.
From a story of giving to the story of receiving, and the Salvation Army's giveaway truck that's causing a stir. Ready to share their thoughts are Billy Deck, CEO and founder of Rocket Ranch Productions, Mike Houlihan, writer, director, and filmmaker. And joining us again is Lawrence Massall, president of the Civic Federation. Hello and welcome. We will dig right into this battle going on in Uptown. They seem to have reached a resolution, but earlier this week, the Salvation Army says that 46th Ward Alderman James Kappelman had asked them to stop serving food out of a mobile truck. The alderman released a statement saying, quote, "Mobile food trucks provide a disincentive to those in need to receive sustained help," essentially saying if it's too easy for homeless people to get food, they're more encouraged to stay homeless. Is this discrimination, or does the alderman have a point? Mike, we'll start with you.
I think the alderman's an idiot.
There you go.
What do you really think?
I mean, this guy is the Grinch of all Grinches. Although I was thinking about going down there and getting a sandwich once in a while, he stopped me from doing that. But I can't believe that they would say you can't help people out. What his motives are, I have no idea. But now it's become a political football, and he's calmed down. And I guess the Salvation Army was pushing back pretty hard, but they've made an agreement, I guess, and I hope it all works out, especially for the guys in the neighborhood.
I guess, so I'm definitely one to, attack the fight against hunger for sure. And so I immediately felt the same way. Maybe not as strong, but I felt definitely that this was unfortunate. So I'm going to play devil's advocate for just a second. You got to imagine this guy probably got a ton of phone calls. I mean, that's what the alderman does. He gets phone calls from businesses, neighbors, concerned potentially about this random new truck that just pulls up and attracts people that, whether right or wrong, these people think might be concerning. So he got probably 1 million phone calls, had to do something, and then quickly had to come up with a great answer. I'm not saying it's a great answer, but an answer that made some sense. So I give him a little credit for the effort. I feel bad for him because I know he was probably in a jam, but it's really nice to hear at least they're trying to work it out.
But he says it's a disincentive, and so the bigger question here is it ever wrong to feed the hungry?
Well, I think one of the points that I would make is that he's attacking a symptom rather than the problem. We all would like to get rid of homelessness, and we'd all like to get rid of, we would rather those people be treated in a better environment to have access to them. The notion that the food trucks are bringing the homeless people into his community is something that I would challenge. At a time in Chicago when we're promoting food trucks, right, in all throughout the Loop and everywhere else, and that people are responding very positively that we're not going to make the free food truck available in the community where it's needed.
So it's all right on one hand to say you can buy a designer cupcake, but you can't get a free bowl of soup.
That's sort of the juxtaposition and the problem that the alderman has. I think the other thing is that the city doesn't have as strong of a track record in providing alternative services for the homeless, for doing something. If you're going to take away what is really a lifelink to a lot of people in that community, those poor people, then you have to have something to replace it with. You can't say we will replace it. You have to actually have something to offer them.
While we're on the question of fairness, another story popped up in the Tribune in the last few days about this red light camera company, which got about $300 million when it had its contract, and a lot of Chicagoans have paid, and the Tribune reveals that the company that installed those cameras is now facing a scandal and has indicated that there's a likelihood that their contract was probably the result of a bribe. Any wonder Chicagoans are cynical about their political life here?
Yeah.
Not only the company that owns it is in Australia, and I can see these guys in Australia. So you're going to Chicago, you're going to need an extra $2 million in walking around money. You got to grease these guys, just because of Chicago's reputation,
I hate that, by the way. When you travel around the world and you let people know you're from Chicago, and we all know the beautiful parts of Chicago and how much it has to offer, but people go, corruption, it's rough, huh? Or whatever, and it's just so negative. But stories like this, you start seeing these relationships come into play, money, changing hands, and people taking unreasonable amounts of trips and whatever else this person, a city official, was enjoying, probably more than all 5 of us put together.
He's denied it, by the way. These are just allegations. We should be fair.
Okay, sure. No, and there's a lot of allegations, and this, we don't know if any of this is true, but it just doesn't look good right now. I mean, just at a time when all these sorts of, people are going to jail, and there's all this other proof that we have bad things going on.
Everybody hates those red camera things anyway because you get $100, they catch you and you get a thing in the mail that says you owe it $100 and there's no debate or anything.
Right, and you don't even remember running a light.
Yeah, exactly.
If you did run a light.
Yeah.
Up to $375 million it's made so far for the city. That's a lot of money.
Well, I guess the mayor is very, he wants this to keep going because it's going to help him fill the budget gap.
But you look at this, the federal prosecutor who eventually did look into this basically said in his report that any reasonable individual would look at this and say, there is suspicion here, this doesn't pass the sniff test. Yet it took a whistleblower sending a note to the Tribune to get this uncovered. Do you think that as Chicagoans, people may be so used to corruption that they don't know what passes the sniff test and what doesn't anymore?
Well, I think in this case you have a company basically being held out, and now the mayor has said that they're not going to be eligible for the contract. There's an enormous amount of money. But yes, we do get worn down, right? There's the litany of people that have basically gone to prison, whether it's aldermen, whether it's our state legislature, or whether it's our governors. It is something that starts to wear people down. But I think we can never be tolerant of it. What that means is that bribery money, that if the alleged bribery money was money that should have gone into the city treasury, because it increased the cost of that company's operations. That company's in big trouble now, just because this was a huge part of their operations. It's a faraway Australian provider. There's no doubt the mayor needs to have that revenue from the red light cameras. Red light cameras have made the city more efficient in its tax collection and in enforcement because they don't need as many policemen on the street, patrolmen on the street to give people those kind of tickets. But there are a huge public uneasiness about what's your ability to challenge these tickets. What is the impact on the public psyche when something that's not very popular, like the parking meters, and then you have a problem with how the contract was bid.
I mean, doesn't this speak to a culture of corruption in Chicago that's very old? I mean, we've had some 40 aldermen go to jail. We've had a congressman who's going to jail now. What does the mayor do here, Rahm Emanuel? And most of this did not happen on his watch, in fairness. What does he do to beat this culture of corruption in the city? Does he have a chance against it?
Good question. I wouldn't want his job, I can tell you that.
I think there's no doubt that the mayor has to address this head on, and is, by basically banning the company from the next contract. But he's caught in a position where he has allegations. He has to, if those allegations prove correct, he can't step in and do. I mean, he can do his own independent investigation, but it has to come to the prosecutor's office, either the state's attorney or the U.S. attorney. The way you solve this is you show intolerance for this. You basically show that the city is not going to tolerate people using bribery to get contracts, and you make sure that your procurement is above that. To date, this is really the first evidence of something, as was pointed out, that happened before he took office. But it really, when you have any large enterprise, whether it's a company, whether it's a government, you have challenges with individuals who have access to influence being bribed. But Illinois is no different than Wisconsin or Michigan, and Chicago is no different than Milwaukee or Madison. You follow the best practices and you enforce it to the nth degree.
Switching gears now to a story with international implications. We woke up this morning to learn that North Korea, the leader there, has made a threat of a preemptive nuclear strike against the U.S. And I'm just wondering, how troubling is it in these times that a former Chicago Bull, known for wearing a wedding dress, knows more about the leader of a rogue nuclear superpower than our State Department does?
Very scary.
And I point out that he wore the wedding dress when he married himself. That was the whole bit.
Thanks.
Very scary. I mean, what's weird was when that first popped up on the TV, I remember thinking, oh my God, shock, almost embarrassment. Why is our one American, one Chicagoan in front of the world, Dennis Rodman, and worried about his character and worried about what his presentation was. But to your point about what happened this morning, it really is nothing compared to the fear and heaviness and just ridiculousness of Kim Jong. Like, I thought that all the media attention is really going towards Rodman, but it just
My question
just
is who's
freaks me
using
out.
who here?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, at one point you've got the leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, using Rodman to show that he's a nice guy, and on the other hand, you've got Rodman basically shooting a documentary for HBO. He's getting media mileage out of
that's
this.
part of it. Oh,
Yeah, and I think there's a serious irresponsibility right there. I mean, think about it. This is such a touchy scenario. You have people for profit, whether it's Vibe, I think it is, with HBO looking to create this film, and just
That's probably the greatest thing that ever happened to them.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm sure
yeah.
they'll personally do really well, but it's such a touchy scenario. And I've met Dennis a bunch of times.
Probably
and
come in your club a lot, huh?
Many times, and he's kind, he's a nice guy, but he's definitely alternative. He's definitely out of the lines. He's definitely a shocking. And what if he was there and he did something as such, out of line, shocking, offensive.
Well, he calls a
on
dictator
behalf of
his good friend.
Right.
That's
But
fairly shocking and
nice
offensive
kid.
right there.
It's very
an awesome
scary
awesome kid.
that a group like that could just go out on their own. Did they talk to the State Department? I don't know, or should they have? And what does the State Department know about this? And what are they doing about it now? It's completely more shocking than it was when we first saw it, in my opinion.
We've got to wrap up, but we can't go without giving a hats off to the Blackhawks, who have set this new record, 24 games in regulation without a loss. How about that?
Pretty amazing.
I love that it's a little bit of everyone, too. It seems like every night on the news, after every game, you're seeing a new player celebrated, which is really interesting.
They had
It shows
three
great team.
players out last night with injuries, and they still managed to win.
I just already, well, actually, I'm not going to jinx it, but I'm just very much excited for a big Chicago celebration. I think in light of everything we've talked about, we could really use a big boost of energy and excitement and
On to the Cubs.
community.
All right, thank you, Billy Deck and Mike Houlihan and Lawrence Massal. We appreciate it today.
And it is like something out of the movies, a steady stream of steam rising from the street at the corner of Clyburn and Diversey in Chicago. Have you noticed it and wondered why? Well, one WBEZ listener did, and the answer is revealed in this week's Curious City.
The simple answer is it's much like a steam iron. It's hot touching cold. It's the condensate lines. Condensate is what they get when they get the steam heat going. They have condensate return lines underground. Cold water line is touching this, which is where our heat is coming from, and it's hot. So these two touching and condensate is leaking onto this cold water line, causing vapors to come up. All it is steam. It's just cold water and hot water, and it's a good thing for the people at the bus stop because it keeps them warm and it's nothing toxic.
Another Chicago mystery solved. Thanks for joining us this week. You are now in the loop.
And the conversation continues right now on WYCC.org. I'm Chris Bury.
And I'm Barbara Pinto. We'll see you next week. Good night.